CloudDB, shaping your new normal.
All right. Welcome everyone to the 2021 APAC Groundbreakers Virtual Tour by Apaco UC. This year our event will be the biggest one ever done with 144 sessions, including normal sessions, workshops, and hands-on labs from 100 different speakers over 17 days. Also, it will cover sessions in 4 different languages. Please remember to register to as many sessions as you can. I would like to say thanks also to all Oracle user groups and Java user groups that made this event possible, and also to our sponsors, Oracle Groundbreakers, and the main sponsor, CloudDB. Now, for today's session, the usual suspects, Apex Dynamics Action Workshop by Lino, Schildenfeld. I always had issues with your last name, Lino. But no worries. Please feel free to write questions at any time during the session at the chat tab on the live webinar application, and the speaker will be answering them at the end of the session. If there are any issues during the presentation, please feel free to contact me at any time on the chat tab again, and I will try to help the best I can. As is a kind of a session workshop from Lino. Lino, if you need to check the chat or let us know to check the chat more frequently, but not in the end, please let us know. Now, without any more delays, I would like to leave you with this amazing session by Lino. Richard, can you click on the option to share Lino's screen, please? Fantastic. I will put myself in mute too, and you put yourself, Richard is already great. Thanks, Lino. I'm with you now.
Sounds good, and thanks, Francisco. Thanks, Richard, for hosting us today. Of course, I want to take the sponsors before I even start. Like, without the sponsors, this would never be possible. So, thanks to all of you who sort of support the action. Right. Today, as Francisco said, it's kind of going to be more of a workshop than just a presentation. So I'm going to have a little bit of slides, but mostly we're going to be doing this live as we talk, and sort of we're going to be trying to do demos and exercises, like literally coding. And right. So if you have a laptop nearby, or if you want to participate, just open any Apex environment or any workspace that you have that you can work on, and pretty much we should be fine to follow this. With that said, let's kick started a little bit about myself. So today nowadays I'm consulting for Skill Builders as a team, right? So if you want to check all the services they provide, just visit the website. That's probably the best way. If you have any questions on it, you can always reach out. On my end, pretty much I try to share my knowledge on the conferences. I have an Apex blog that you might come across, and also try to participate in Australia Oracle user group or organizing stuff on Apex end, right? And these are some things I consulted with or where I volunteered as well. So things that we'll do today, right? Point is, I'm trying to cover all variety of knowledges and experiences, right? So we're going to start light and we're going to build up, but we're going to be trying to sort of dismantle things on a basics level, so people are able to understand and able to realize what techniques and why we use them in Apex, right? So that's what this session is about. So it's not deep end, like deep dive thing. It's more kind of let's dismantle this and let's talk about it in more details, right? That's kind of where it's going. And then eventually at the end, we're going to see some of the good or bad practices, of course, because we have to touch on that as well, just to show examples, and pretty much then we're going to wrap up. As a prerequisite, pretty much there's nothing you need. All you need, as I said, is just a workspace. Any workspace, any Apex version. I'm going to be doing these things on the emp table. So if you guys don't have an emp table ready, or if you don't have that emp and deb tables installed, right, under the SQL workshop, as the image is showing, under the SQL workshop, there's utilities. Under utilities, there's a sample data set, and then there you're going to find easy way to install emp and data sets, right? And pretty much that's all that you need. And of course, you have to have a PC or something where you're going to work. So this is just to showcase that at any point, if you need any of these demo data, you can always go, as I said, so SQL Workshop Utilities, and then you can find the data sets and simply install it. Okay, so without losing too much time, let's hop on the demo, right? So important message. So I'm going to be hopping on my application, so just bear with me. So this is an empty application. Just let me try refreshing it to see that it works. All good. And pretty much the point of the first exercise is, if we open any website, let me just try one that has a little bit more things in it. Let me try that one. Okay, so literally any website. So just let me try something that has a little bit more data. Sample application. Okay, pretty much any sample will do. Just to showcase, so sample apps, for example, that's a good one. Oh, good. So the point here is any page, or even Apex page, or regardless of if it's Apex or not, has pretty much, if we inspect the page, you'll see what it's all about. It's just an HTML. So this on the left, all of this on the left is generated by Apex, which is just an HTML, right? And there's lots of code, like there's tags that you have to be familiar with and stuff. But it's pretty much for the exercise that we're doing today. The message here is anything that you see on Apex page, because we're talking about Apex today, right? So any web page, pretty much, and any element you see, pretty much, we have ability as developers to enable interaction with it. So why we're here as developers is to make interaction with our web pages and our apps as smooth, as nice, as comfortable for the end users, right? So that's why we're here, and that's where dynamic actions come in. So dynamic actions are here to enrich the user experience, right? And in order to understand how it works, it's important that we realize that underneath everything that we see is actually an HTML, right? So in Apex example, so what we're going to be doing, so I'll close this. In our example, so I'm going to just hop on the page here. So I'm going to create a simple classic report, right? And if you guys want to follow, as I mentioned before, one sec, let me just hop on my presentation. There's a URL, so codeshare.io, and then rbmzkj. Just make sure that you type these uppercase, lowercase as it's written here. I'll leave this for 5 more seconds. And pretty much all the code that I'm going to be using today, and all things that I'll be using today, is written in steps on this URL, right, or on this CodeShare code that I'm sharing with you guys. So moving away from it now. So pretty much I opened that same thing on my just a text, because it does a funny thing. So I have it here open, but it does a funny thing that it highlights my text. I don't know why. So that's the same URL that you've seen, CodeShare IBM ZKJ, right? And I won't be reading it through here because it's going to be hard for you to see. So I'll close that one and I'll use instead my just standard text editor, right? So first demo is here, and pretty much these are the steps for the first demo. So we're going to be creating a classic report on emp table, okay? And then we're going to be interacting with it. So let's create a classic report for starters. Create a region. So we're going to say report. Okay, classic report. I'm just going to say it's an emp table. Okay, and I'm going to save, and we're going to run. Simple as that, right? Okay, and now as I said before, let's say if we wanted, so this is the hello world example. So let's say if we wanted to interact with the column called ename. So we wanted to interact with these cells here, right? Okay, so how would I know how to find what I want to interact with, or what I'm going to be basing my dynamic actions on? So first I inspect the page. So you can do it with F12 or just right click, as you've seen me, right click and inspect on the page. And pretty much now we're looking at this exact row, right, or the cell, right? And I can see that I have a class T report cell, but I'm going to assume that all columns we're going to have that same class, so that wouldn't be good enough. So I need something more unique that's going to be specifying my column, right? My e-name column. So I want to interact with everything that I have in that column. So I will pretty much think that TD, and then you have headers here. So everything that's in HTML tags I can use as a selector. So I'm going to be using this TD combined with the headers to create this dynamic action. So let's see how that's going to work. So on dynamic action, I'm going to say right click, and I'm going to say on e-name. And then here, I'm going to say a jQuery selector. So pretty much where am I finding these steps? So this is step number 1, create a dynamic, so create a classic report. Step number 2 is create an action. So all I need is this part. So I'm copying this section, copy, and I'm putting it here. And I say save. And then on the other side, I have to create a true action, at least one true action. And again, where that's coming, so it says true action here, and pretty much all I'm copying is the code that I have here. Good. And I say save. And if we were to run, you'll see that if I click on 123, that's fine. If I click on a king, all it's going to be fine. Okay. So pretty much I use something that's very common in Apex applications and very common how we build custom things into Apex, where people say I want to interact to something that's not that common. It's not a button or it's not a branch or it's not something that's built in Apex, so we have to custom build it, or we need to improve it in a way how a user wants to interact with the page, right? So you've seen, so first thing is I inspected what's underneath, so I have to find something that I'm going to be using a selector. And then once I have a selector, it's very easy to sort of do a true action or to execute an action, right? And in this case, it's just a dummy one. So I'm just alerting that this triggering element text is the one I clicked. So I say clicked on that value that I pick up. So it's pretty much just the text that I read out from the triggering element. Depending on the cell I click, it knows that that's the element that triggered it, and it just picks up the text. Just very common technique. If you have questions where that did this come from, right? It's just always you can use a help section in the middle pane where it explains what it is and sort of how you can utilize that in your dynamic actions, right? Now we're just going to complicate it a little bit more. So I'm going to change the attribute on my report just because I'm on the latest version of Apex. So I'm going to say, okay, I want to see 5 rows here instead of all of them. Okay, so you can see the only change is that I have a pagination here. So if I click a king now, everything still works. But then if I go on the next pagination, right, and I try Blake, for example, or Clark, or Scott, you'll see that my dynamic action doesn't respond anymore. So it's important that it's one of the crucial aspects or features in Apex is in any website pretty much. We have sections on a page that can partially reload, so they get rewritten. So pretty much when we create our dynamic action, what happens is a page or Apex puts a listener on the page on this particular column, right? And then once Apex refreshes, when I click previous and forward, so my section of the page gets refreshed, I lose that, so my listener gets disconnected from a component. But there's a neat way how we can sort of keep that in place on dynamic action level. There's something called events code. As you can see by default, as I haven't changed it, it's static, right? And there's 3 options: dynamic, once, or static as default. But if I change that to dynamic and say save, you'll see that we won't have that issue anymore. So if I do Jones, that's fine. If I change to previous, you can see that now my Smith is triggering the dynamic action. So it's a very common thing to forget about events code. So most likely when you have dynamic like reports or something that's dynamically refreshes, pretty much just keep an eye that we want to keep this on dynamic, right? This is and pretty much that's where the demo one at this stage ends. So let's sum it up. Let's see what we've done. Pretty much, so it's important to understand that anything on the page, so for people who are new to Apex, pretty much anything you see on the page, title, like as you're seeing here, columns in the report, we can inject buttons in there, we can do whatever custom HTML, anything we can use to sort of trigger dynamic actions to be the listener, so to be listen interaction between the user and that element, right? So we're going to react on that action. And pretty much just how to use this triggering element property of dynamic action framework in Apex, right? We're just reading out the text in this example. Perfect. As Francisco and Richard said, if you have any questions, you drop it in a chat box, and we'll pick it up at the end. So we are on demo number 2, right? So what's the point here? Something very common and very useful, which is sometimes our dynamic action, our pages in Apex grow big. So this is a small page, so I'm hoping you're going to get the point. But I have a text region at the bottom, and I have multiple elements on a page. I have some buttons, and I have a list of values. And pretty much the aim or the ask is here, as we interact with these buttons and drop downs, we want to change the size of the text. So the point is, so how we can do this the best way, how we can interact and how we can minimize the load on the page and the code on the page the best way, right? So if we were to jump in, so I'm going to be jumping. So this is my demo 1. We went through all the steps pretty much, and we landed on demo 2. So I'm just going to put. So if we were to do this, so let me start creating sections for this exercise. So we're going to do a blank page. We're going to say multiple elements. That's fine. Yes, I need to have a menu item, which is just fine. And we're going to finish. So it's just an empty page at this stage. And then I'm going to create 2 regions. So I'm going to have region 1. And I'm going to have region 2. Okay. And then in this region, for region number 2, I'm going to have some HTML text inside. So if we have a look at the page at this point, so pretty much region 1 is empty. That's where I'm going to have all my buttons. And then I have some text in here that I want to interact with, right? So I want to sort of make this text go bigger or smaller depending. So let's give it a go. So I'm going to create an LOV here. So I'm going to call it the size just to keep it nice and simple. And it's going to be an LOV. So it's a select list. And I'm going to say it's a custom, so static value. So I'm going to say small. That's 1.2 EMs, and then I'm going to say medium, that's 1.4 EMs, then I'm going to say large, that's going to be 1.6. Okay. Then also I'm going to create 3 buttons, so I'm going to call it small, and I'll put it in the region. We're going to create medium. Okay, and then we need another button that we can call large. This is the starter, right? So I have a drop down. If I change to the size, or if I click a button in the same shape or form, I want this text to be changed. So normally how people would think, oh, that's easy. I know I can create one dynamic action hanging off LOV, and then I'll create one dynamic action on every of these buttons, right? So let's give that a go. I'm going to just pick up my, so I've done the buttons, we've done the LOV, which is fine. Okay, and now I'm creating my dynamic action the way we sort of initially planned. So quickly, how I can create dynamic action on an element. So I'm going to right click and I say create dynamic action. So I'm going to say on LOV change, perfect. And I'm going to say, okay, I don't want to show, so most of these, or all of them, are going to be just execute JavaScript. Okay. And then I'm saying execute some JavaScript code. So just let's have a look quickly into it. So I'm trying to pick, so this is a class selector for my text, and I'm trying to set a CSS font size to be a value that I'm sending in. So pretty much all I'm trying to do is hit the CSS of this element. So this is a jQuery selector, so all good. And I say save. And in the same shape, I can create a dynamic action. So I won't give it a proper name, which is just bear with me because I want to just save some time. So I'm executing a JavaScript action again on each of the buttons. So I'm just going to copy that text. And then I'm saying that's fine. And then all I do is create dynamic actions, which is going to be execute JavaScript. And then I change this to be 1.4. And I can do one more large where I'm executing JavaScript. And then I'm saying it will be 1.6. Okay. And then if I start the page, restart or refresh the page, I say large, you see I get the large text. If I say medium, I say medium. If I hit small, small, right? Same with the buttons. Small, medium, small, large. You can see that all are doing the job. Okay. But from perspective of us developers, right? So we would come to this page, or someone has done this page and we come back to it. And now we look at the dynamic actions. Okay. So you can see here I have 4 dynamic actions. And pretty much all of these 4 that you see, these true actions, are actually doing the same type of thing, or actually the same thing. They're just increasing the text. So pretty much there's another way how we can deal with it. So let me quickly. So I'll drop this. So you'll see how I can redesign this. And so first thing first. So let me save this. So I dropped all 4 buttons, and I'll do one special dynamic actions. So I'm creating when this will be triggered, and there's a custom event. So I'm saying custom, okay. And you'll see in a second why. So I have to give it a useful name. So I'll give it a name that's change text. I'll say this is the name of the event. So this is really important because by this we can call it from other places in Apex, right? So just remember this place. And then we're going to say a jQuery selector. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, good. So we say not jQuery, but description, and we say document. Okay. And then we're going to be doing here execute JavaScript, which I assume is always the case. Okay. And then execute JavaScript. Perfect. And there you go. So that's my JavaScript. And then I say my affected element. So we're going to be touching on what's affected element in a second. So my affected element is just a query, so jQuery selector, where I'm saying it's my text. Okay, so what I did here is, so I defined one place on my page where this code would actually handle. So this is one place to handle change of my text. So how we do this? So just let's briefly touch. So I'm saying this affected element, CSS, so the element that's listed on the affected element, we're going to change its property CSS, font size in this case, to be this data font size. So there's going to be data that I'll be sending in from my other, with calls to this dynamic action, okay? So that's that bit, and then, because I'm saying this affected element, I need to define affected element. So I said it's a jQuery selected type, and then I'm touching, or I'm selecting the exact text with this class selector, right? Okay, but in order for things to work, I need to change my original LOV JavaScript. So I'm going to go to my original LOV dynamic action. So this used to be the text, which now I'm swapping, okay? So that was my initial thought, but now I think I can do better. So I do a trick here with Apex Event Trigger. So what this is a manual way that I, as developer, can invoke or call another dynamic action to trigger. So which dynamic action I'm calling, this is the name of the custom dynamic action I just created. And then this is the data I'm sending in. And what am I sending in? So I'm sending an object which is a font size, has a font size property with the value of the triggering element. And I say okay. And if we rerun and try again, still should still be working. So you can see, so this thing now is just invoking a global level custom action, right? Let's call it a global. So this thing is waiting and it's being called from here. So I have one to maintain if I need to, which is in this place, and this is just a call to that one. And in the same shape, or in the same way, I'm going to say buttons click. So I don't have to have one, I can have many at the same time. So how? I know buttons have a property on them which is called class T button. So each button in Apex will have a T button class on, if it's done by Apex, right? If it's not custom or handled by us in any way. And then for that, we're going to be executing another dynamic action, JavaScript again. Yeah. So let's have a look at this one. Perfect. So again, Apex event trigger. I want to trigger my custom defined event or my custom defined action. I'm just going to be sending something different. So in a button instance, I'm going to be sending a data attribute value that's going to be with font size. Okay, and now I'm going to be utilizing that on my text sort of change dynamic action. Perfect. If I run that, so you'll see that it should still be working fine. Perfect. But if I try now to do my buttons, you'll see that my buttons don't do anything. So this is another like crash course on what do you do when things don't work. So again, F12, we open inspection tools. So it's very important to get familiar with these inspection tools and how they work. So I'm going to open console in my case. I'm clearing it out, and I'm going to turn on a debug on this page. So combo of these two is where you want to be heading. Okay, so my page is reloaded, and if I click a button, so what I get here is like what dynamic actions are being triggered. So first one is, as I expected, is when my button is clicked. Perfect. And then I'm expecting that it's going to call another dynamic action, which is change text size, which is perfect, exactly what I want. But then again, it didn't do what I expected to do. And let's inspect a little bit why. So there's lots of attributes and details and data that comes with these dynamic actions that you can explore and sort of look into and try to figure out what happens. And we're going to be looking at something where we know, or I know that I'm using data attribute. So I'm checking the data attribute here. And then it says, okay, it's an object, which is a font size, but then it has an undefined value here. So pretty much what it comes down to is I'm expecting that I'm actually not sending any values from my button. So between this call and a change text size dynamic action. So pretty much it just executes something where it's undefined. So I'm sending an empty or null value right in it, undefined value in it. So when it triggers, it doesn't have value, so it doesn't do anything, which means it just my text stays blank. So quickly, how I can change this. Perfect. Another just a hint on it. So you need to turn on a debug. You need to inspect a little bit the console, and if there's any Pl Sql stuff or Ajax calls or anything, another very important tab here is the network one. So if I had any post actions here or something that was posting or getting the data from a database, this is where I could inspect it, right? And you can see here I can see what request was sent, what details I have, but we're going to touch that in a second. These are two most important tabs when you're debugging dynamic actions, right? So just remember that's a take from here. All good. And then if I was to fix that, I need to put my custom defined data attribute on my button. So that's what I figured out was missing, because I simply skipped it. And then on a custom attribute. So there's many ways how we can do this. I'm just showcasing this as one of the options. So of course, as in anything, you have multiple ways of managing things. This is just a demo kind of thing, not saying the best practice. So if I put that, what did I just do here? So I planted in custom data attribute. So it's a legit HTML description of an item, right, of my tag, and it's just going to add something to my element, so to my buttons in this case, which is going to be called data font size, and it's going to have a certain value. Okay, and then if we run now, so that you see that I'm not imagining this up, I'm going to open the inspection tool. You'll see here that it's gonna so in this section here, it has data font size up. If I double click, you'll see that it is a data font size 1.2 EM, and then this I can send to my custom dynamic action. And if I click it now, you'll see now, because I have a value set and I have that data attribute there, which my custom dynamic action expects, this works perfectly fine. All good. Back to PowerPoint. So you see here something. So very often you're going to have this custom dynamic action on your web page or your Apex page. How we can trigger it is using Apex event trigger. There's a JavaScript API. It's a standard. It's been here for forever, since version 5, I believe. We use something that's called event bubbling. Event bubbling, I have a next slide. So each HTML page looks like this. There's a tree structure, right? So we were interacting with a let's say a TD in a place. So there's a structure that it can bubble up and goes all the way up. And the top one is the window, and the one that we used was the document. So pretty much we were listening to on that document level if anything was triggering and calling us, right? So it's wait, it's bubbling, checking the parent, parent, coming up to the document, and then, oh, yes, I have someone or something that's waiting for me and listening for my, and then we triggered that custom event. Very common technique that you're going to see in Apex, right? What else did we see? So we use this technique, like this affected element CSS. We also use how do we pass elements, so how do we pass values from one dynamic action to the other. So we use that object array. And then also there's different techniques. So we've seen the difference between my item, which it was LOV, right, and how I can do it on a button level as well. And now we can jump into demo 3. Here we're going to be doing the classic one, which is like how. So I have a report again. So it's just an emp data or any table. As I said, you could do this on any table. The logic is similar. You just change a little bit of code. So how would we go about creating a delete button, right? A very common technique, and I just dismantle it here. So if you need to seed your data, so I prepare insert scripts for you if you want. If you don't need it, just skip that. So we're going to create an interactive report in this case. Perfect. So let's do another page just to keep things separate. So I'm going to give a report. Interactive report is fine. I say delete. If I say delete properly, that's fine. So again, need a menu. I'm going to base it now on a query. So I want to check that my query is fine. So I just select columns for my emp table and I say create. Okay, so we're going to be inspecting and sort of checking out different techniques how to do this, right? So as you can see, it's just a standard report. I do have two of the same column. You'll notice that I have doubled the data, but it just so I'm going to be using ID column for something else in a second. And I wanted to show that emp now is the one that we actually clicking, so that we know that we're interacting with it, right? Okay, so the ask is, how do we turn a column, or how do we turn a value in a column or in a report into a button? So Apex Oracle.com UT is the website you want to go to, and then under references there is a button builder thing, and this is I can't emphasize how crazy easy this is and how crazy important this is. So you'll see as I change the properties on this page, so let's say I want an icon, you'll see that my button on the top changed, and all of this has changed as well. So if I do text, you'll see how it changes. So I get different things, right? And I want to say, okay, that's fine. I want to remove decorations, and I want to say you are, I think that's all I want. Okay, and you'll see what happened. And I put an icon. Let me just do text an icon and just any icon. You see, it changes as I go along. And this technique and this way. So it has a way how I can define my link to look like a button, or I can put simply this into my element to simply generate a button look and feel element on that same place, right? So I'm going to be, in the first example, I'm going to be using this one. So this two. And in the second one, we'll have a look if we have time to finish on that one. Okay, what does that mean? So let's expand the columns. We go on to ID column. We're going to say, yep, that's a link. Okay, what does that do is it creates, this is a definition of my, or more specification of my URL. So I'm going to say your target is URL, and my URL is nothing but a hash. Okay. So what it does, it opens two additional properties, which is a link text and link attribute. And if you have been paying attention, we have a link text and link attribute. So if I was to copy simply and paste two of these back in each of these places, I would get a button. So that's exactly what I've done in my instance. So I have, this is the edit target. So I'm just copying now the link. So I'm gonna, whoops, sorry. So this is my link text, and then I go for my, come on, there you go. And for my link attributes, I'm just using something that I'm going to be, so I added two things here. I added a delete me class, and I added a data attribute again. So I called it data dash ID, where I'm passing in my emp now. And you'll see how that's going to be handy in my instance. Okay, so if I say save, and if I run the page, we should be at the place. Okay, so I'm just going to make it look a bit better. I'm going to center that, center this, and we come back to it. So I could call this, do you want to delete, or just empty, or an ID in my case. So if I click this, as you can tell, nothing is happening. Of course, nothing is happening because I still didn't define any of dynamic actions. So how we would do that? So let's inspect the instructions. Okay, so we need to create a dynamic action. Dynamic action is going to be a click one on jQuery selected, delete me. So you see here, I'm using a class that I just put on my link. So I can go here, I can say click, create dynamic action. So I'm going to say on delete of my jQuery click selector. So it's event is of type click, so I'm listening for click event, and I'm going to be listening on the element that I'm going to pick with the class delete me that I just defined for my link. Okay, and then this one will be a little bit more complex. So we have 5 true actions. So as we click on the action, we want to ask the user, are you sure you want to continue? Okay, so we can do that easily. So we're going to change that action to be confirm action. We're going to say new in Apex 21.2. So this is a new thing. So previously we would have a title. We can define some icons and some more things here, and we can say save. Okay, and if we run, now if I click, yes, you see that I got a title that I typed in, I got the message, and even if I clicked OK, nothing will happen because we still didn't build the dynamic action till the end. So let's keep it coming. So we're going to have a confirm. which is fine. So we're going to be setting a dynamic action. Okay, before I can do that, I need to define one page element, just because I want to. So I have one page element, and then I'm going to be calling empno. Save. Okay, then I can go back and I can create an action. An action is going to be of a set value. Okay, and that's going to be a JavaScript expression, which I'm just going to be copying from here. Okay, so JavaScript expression. So this is the second dynamic action we're doing. So we're going to do that. Set value, and then elements is going to be affected by. Affected element is just that item that I created. So that's my hidden item on the page where I'm going to be. So what's the trick here? So we're interacting between client side and database side. So we need to have a way how to pass the values that we picked and interact with on the screen, which is the client side. And we need to pick that ID. Normally we work with the IDs because that's the easiest. If I want to delete the record in a table, I need an ID. And I take that ID and I simply say delete from my page or delete from my table where ID equals to that number, right? That's simply where we go. So this is my temporary stash. So I'm taking that number somewhere on the page in a hidden item. So that's this step. Then the next step is I'm going to create a Pl Sql code, which I need, of course, as I just said, because we want to be deleting something. So I'm going to be deleting from my table. Okay, and normally I never use commit here, but anyway, it's just bear with me. I want to reformat this. Just so it looks so no, you don't even need this, but it was just copy and pasting. So pretty much this is my code. So I'm saying on a page 3. So just keep an eye that you have to change these things. So depending on your page number, we can validate that it's true and that it's working. And I say okay. That's going to be my execute number 3 or my third action. And then after we finish, we have a refresh, which is, so after we delete, we want to refresh, which is normal. We want to refresh a region on the page. And then as last action, we want to showcase just that we have deleted. So we're going to display a success message. Okay, and then I need to change this to be number 3. So in Apex 21.2, there's another way how we can do this instead of Apex. So there's a way 3 ways how we can do this. So let me just open this because it's going to be easier. So 3 ways how we can do this. This is kind of common across all. So that one, we can replace it with something that you're used to, apex.item. And then you have double quotes and then p through empno. And then we would say get value. So that's one method. In Apex 21.2, we have another method that's been exposed to us, which is kind of makes it easier. So we can just say it like this with the dot, and then we can say even just the value, or there's like. So very similar syntax, and so pretty much Apex items, that's a new API. I'm not going to complicate things, but just bear with me that it's multiple ways how to do that. And in my page that I share with you, where you can follow these steps, I think I'm using one of these alternatives. Okay, so I say okay here, and I say save. Perfect. If we were to run the page, let's say I'm not going to be deleting kinks, I can play with these 1, 2, 3s because someone else created it. So I say, okay, I'm new. If I say, okay, I want to continue, I'm expecting that 1, 2, 3 is going to be removed from the page. And it says, okay, employee number with the ID 12 is removed from the page, but I've seen that my region reloaded, and I still see that number 12 is here. Okay, so let me do 2 things. So I'm going to change event scope to be dynamic. That's one thing. And then also, how would we debug this? So let's quickly debug this. So I need a network tab. Why do I need a network tab? You'll see in a second. Because I'm submitting something to database. So I'm going to say click, refresh. Okay. Okay, so I do refresh, and then if I say clear and I say okay, you're gonna see that my page is doing a post here. Okay, and then I could inspect what I was sending there, so I can see that a page was submitting a page item. So this is, I'm just inspecting what happened when this post happened. So when I submitted to a page, so when I submitted my page, I can see that I'm sending page items and I don't see any values in here. So immediately it rings a bell in my hand. I'm just guiding you here from perspective of, I'm guiding you from perspective of, because I already know where the error is, but you would explore a little bit the network tab. You can see the response, you can see here, and then you can play along and you see, so I got all of that, and you can see that my my element 12 is still returned back. And obviously there's an issue with my delete, and I know what it is. I'm missing an item to submit. So in order for my Pl Sql to pick up values from my page, I need to put them in items to submit. And with this, I believe we are at the end. So you can see here, so I can, network tab is still on. I'll just simply remove it. I'll just delete one of these 12s again. I say OK. You'll see that event is removed. You really see that I don't have that 12 anymore. And if we check the post again, so I just need to pick the right moment. You'll see here. All good. It's going to submit that page item with the value, right? And that's exactly what we wanted, and that's exactly what. All good. So that's going to be fine. All good. And because we now submitted the page with the value in a session state that dynamic action was able to sort of use, my element 12 is gone. And in the same way, if I were to delete, I'm just going to drop that because I don't need it in there. It's going to delete my item number 13 as well. Okay, going back quickly because we are running out of time. What did we learn here? So again, we're using different techniques here, how to render and send elements. So this is the demo where we're interacting between client and the database. So we deleting records, so we're talking to database. How do we pass the values between client and your Pl Sql code, right? So that's important. There's many ways. This is just a dismantled version of it. In my code that I shared with you guys on that URL, if I say code share IO or something, yep, you'll see that eventually at the end, when we finish this demo 3, there's a challenge or how normally you would do it. So it's a little bit the same looking. So it's the same technique. It's just different ways how we pass that value in. Okay. So I'm not going to go into it now as we do this workshop, which is just something that you can play with if you want later on. Bad examples. So give your dynamic actions useful names. You'll see in a second why. Consolidate the code. So if you come back after someone and you've seen that you can do it better with less code, do it with less code. I know it's going to cost you a little bit of time, but with the long run, you're going to be saving tons of money. If you need to reload, so if you have a page that's using a web services, for example, that's something that takes long, and if you base this on your page and you make your user wait for the response of your web service, sometimes your page will load forever. We had that instance which was changed in Apex 21.2 with lazy loading on classic reports or interactive reports. You want to make user feel that the page loaded instantly, and then once the page is loaded, you can trigger a dynamic action that will refresh these components on the page that where you needed to pick up these data from slower response Pl Sql. Is it the REST API or something that's slow? You can do it through JavaScript, right? So that's somewhere where I advocate for using JavaScript over just the Pl Sql processes, right? If you have pages, structure it. So put regions around it, put elements in it, so we have a way how we can uniquely and easily identify these items. I had one form with 400 page elements on it, and I was giving a task to optimize the dynamic action code, and it was one like big chaos. Another example is like, once your page grows, you immediately have a situation where on the right you see here that you have many alerts here. And then with more and more actions added to the page, it gets very hard to debug and maintain this code. So in this favor, or in this case, I would probably be advocating that you put your code in a JavaScript file. And on the left, you see an example of freebies of every factory, so developed by every team. And pretty much it's so easy to read. So if you want to read the code, if you have to go back and inspect, it would be easier to debug code on the left, because it's so easy to read, even though you don't have to be a JavaScript expert, you know what's happening when it's happening. Where on the other side, on the right, you only have a clue until you sort of play with the page. And just recently I saw Jürgen tweeting about that he has a page with 100 dynamic action on it. So it's not that it won't happen to you guys, so depending on the size of the project. And this was how it actually looked like. So it's so big that 100 can't fit on one slide, right? It's that big. And then Matt responded, no, but you're not the record holder, right? So there's other people who've done other things, right? And you can see here, a number is 820 dynamic actions on one page. So imagine how big that gets. And in these instances, it's very common and it's very recommended that you guys go into JavaScript file. So keep your code in a file if it gets this big. And with this said, I'm at the end. If we have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. So it's about finding the right balance. It's not keep it all declarative. If you can, perfect. It's going to work. But if it grows too big, maybe it's time to go JavaScript files, right? It's easy now. We can create and edit JavaScript files in Apex 21, like application files easily, so you don't have to invent the wheel, right? Consolidate, as you've seen, tips and techniques that we've done. Minimize the custom code. I mean, if you can, of course, keep it nice and simple. Thanks for attending my session, and pretty much hoping that you enjoyed the Apex Day today, because I know we had Shakib around and Christina and all of these good speakers. So it's great that Francisco and the team have organized this. Richard, if you have any questions at this stage, I'm happy to take them on.
Hi, Lino. Finally, I can hear you, and how good. I was listening to the whole session, and looks like I don't see any questions from the people at the moment. I don't know if Richard has any questions for Lino or anyone else, anybody else watching this session have any questions to Lino. If not, for sure, Lino is okay to the people to contact you via let's see, Twitter, and ask you any questions they have. Or fantastic. And also you guys can contact us, also the organization, and we can forward Lino any questions too. You can find the best way that accommodate you with any questions you have. Also, starting 48 hours after each session was live, we are working hard to enable a replay option that everyone can go to your tab attendee in the top right corner of the application of the APAC group, the Groundbreakers Tour event, and you will see the link for the live event that, of course, already passed, but you also will see the link to the replay. And that replay will be available until the 30th of December. That means for labs like these, workshops like Lino did, you can go slow with the replay slowly, stop each options, go to the material that Lino share with you, and practice by yourself. And of course, ask Lino if you get stuck on any parts, and he will help you. And the same with all the other sessions in the event. But to see that option, you need to register to attend the sessions, even the ones that already passed. That way that sessions will be added to your personal calendar schedule, and you will be able to see these links. All right, looks like I was trying to make times to see if anyone anyone was giving time to anyone to ask questions, but no questions. Thank you, Richard, to remind everybody else that Lino has one more session in the Groundbreakers Tour with about JavaScript in Apex for Pl Sql development on 30th of November. Stay connected. Well done. All right. Saying that, thank you so much, Lino. Excellent session, excellent workshop, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy a lot your session, also with the replays. And I don't know what time is for you right now. I think so it's early morning for you, but thank you so much, and an honor always to have you here presenting to the community.
Thanks, Francisco, and I appreciate the opportunity to actually come here and present, right? So it's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And for everyone, please continue enjoying the conference and watching as many sessions you can. And please be safe and look after you and yourself in these pandemic times. Hopefully next year or soon we can see each other and start having face-to-face events. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. Richard, you can play the stop rec on the red bottom to stop the recording, and then press the stop one.
CloudDB, shaping your new normal.